On April 9, 1942, American and Filipino soldiers surrendered to the Japanese after a 3-month-long battle known as the Battle of Bataan. 76,000 soldiers who forfeited were primarily Filipino, but about 12,000 were American. Of these 12,000 Americans, around 15% or 1,800 soldiers were part of the 200th and 515th Coast Artillery, which is a predominantly Native American military unit. One day after the battle was lost, the Japanese forced the prisoners of war to begin marching north towards a war camp in San Fernando, Philippines. The journey was a grueling 65 miles, and the Japanese treated the captives atrociously. The prisoners were tortured and deprived of basic necessities such as water and food. They tortured the hostages with a method known as the Oriental Sun treatment, in which prisoners were commanded to sit in intense sun for numerous hours at a time without any water. If a soldier tried to sneak water from his canteen and he was caught, the Japanese would immediately take it and dump it out to show their power over the prisoners. Oriental sun treatment and other cruelties caused many men to go insane. As the soldiers became weaker and weaker from the lack of food and clean water, some soldiers began to fall down during the lengthy march. Captives were occasionally allowed to carry their fallen friends, but most had to continue walking without acknowledging their fellow soldiers. If a prisoner was unable to stand back up again, a Japanese soldier would shoot the fallen man and force the other prisoners to continue walking. If another soldier tried to help the shot man, they would also be shot. On some occasions during the march, the Japanese would randomly select a captive and beat them with the butts of their rifles and leave them on the side of the road to die. After a whole week of constant walking and a huge deficiency of food and water, the prisoners of war arrived at San Fernando War Camp, where they would be held captive. Upon arrival, the soldiers received more Oriental sun treatment and their bags and pockets were checked for any possessions. If a Japanese-related item was discovered, such as a yen, the prisoner would be killed immediately. The conditions at the camp were disgusting. The prisoners received minimal food and water, and disease spread quickly through the compounds. They lacked any form of medical care for the prisoners. San Fernando War Camp was overcrowded by nearly 2 times its limit. In July 1942, all the American prisoners of war were relocated to Camp Cabanatuan. In order to transport the thousands of captives, the Japanese packed the Americans into extremely small freight trains. In 1944, after the Japanese discovered that the United States was planning to rescue their prisoners of war, the Japanese sent over half of the captives to China and Japan to work as laborers in the garment and coal industries. In August of 1945, the prisoners of war were finally freed. In all, around 2/3 of Americans died in both the death march and the war camps. Of the survivors who returned home, another 1/3 died because of overdose and suicide, most likely caused by post-traumatic stress disorder. Of the men in the 200th and 515th Coast Artillery, 50% survived. The Japanese general who was held responsible, General Masahiro Homa, was convicted on April 3, 1946 of war crimes. He was sentenced